There is a quiet misunderstanding that follows people who cry easily, a soft but persistent judgment that they are fragile, unstable, or unable to cope with the weight of the world. And yet, when you slow down and really look at the psychology beneath those tears, a very different picture begins to emerge, one that is far more complex, far more human, and honestly, far more resilient than most people expect. Crying easily is often less about weakness and more about sensitivity, not in the shallow sense of being easily hurt, but in the deeper sense of being deeply attuned, as if the emotional volume of life is turned up just a little louder for them. For these people, experiences do not skim the surface, they sink in, spreading gently but thoroughly through the nervous system, touching memories, values, hopes, and fears all at once. And when that internal landscape becomes full, tears become a natural release rather than a breakdown. The brain, after all, does not cry out of failure, it cries out of processing. And research into emotional regulation shows that tears can be one of the body's most efficient ways to discharge emotional arousal, calming the nervous system and restoring balance. People who cry easily often have highly responsive limbic systems, especially in areas connected to empathy and emotional awareness, which means they feel not only their own emotions with intensity, but also the emotional signals of others, sometimes without consciously trying to. A sad story, a kind gesture, a moment of injustice, or even a piece of music can bypass logic and speak directly to the emotional brain. And when that happens, tears arrive like an honest translator, expressing what words cannot quite organize in time. There is also something important to understand about how early life experiences shape this tendency, because many people who cry easily learned, consciously or unconsciously, that emotions were safest when expressed rather than suppressed, or they grew up in environments where emotional awareness was heightened, where moods mattered, where connection required sensitivity. Others learned the opposite, that emotions were overwhelming or unpredictable, and crying became a way to regulate those internal storms, a self-soothing response that carried into adulthood. Neither path is a flaw, they are adaptations, intelligent responses to the emotional climates people grew up in, and the mind rarely lets go of strategies that once kept it safe. It is also worth noting that crying easily often coexists with strong emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize subtle shifts in feeling, to name emotions accurately, and to respond to them with nuance. These individuals may notice changes in tone, pauses in conversation, or the unspoken weight behind someone's smile, and holding all of that awareness can be exhausting, like carrying many invisible threads at once. So tears sometimes become the moment where those threads are gently set down. Society, however, has not always been kind to this trait, especially in cultures that prize stoicism, control, and emotional restraint, teaching people that strength looks like silence and composure, even when the inside is cracking. For someone who cries easily, this creates a painful contradiction, because their body is doing exactly what it knows how to do to restore equilibrium, yet the world tells them they should hide it, swallow it, or be ashamed of it. Over time, this can lead to self-criticism, the belief that something is wrong with them, when in reality the problem lies not in the tears, but in the narrow definition of strength they have been handed. Psychologically speaking, strength is not the absence of emotional response, it is the capacity to move through emotion without being destroyed by it, and crying, when it comes naturally, is often part of that movement. Tears carry biochemical markers of stress, and their release can physically lower tension, slow the heart rate, and create a sense of relief, even if that relief is quiet and fleeting. People who cry easily often bounce back faster than those who suppress their emotions, because suppression requires constant mental effort, a tightening of control that eventually leaks out as anxiety, irritability, or numbness. Crying, by contrast, is honest and direct. It says, "This matters. "This touched me. This overwhelmed me for a moment, and then it passes." There is also a tenderness in how people who cry easily tend to relate to others, because having felt deeply themselves, they are often gentle with the emotions of those around them, less likely to dismiss pain, more likely to listen without rushing to fix. Their tears are not just about sadness either. They cry from joy, relief, gratitude, awe, those sudden moments when something aligns so perfectly that the heart has no other language. This kind of crying reveals a nervous system that is open rather than armored, receptive rather than defended, and while that openness can make life feel more intense, it also makes it richer, more textured, more alive. Of course, like any trait, crying easily exists on a spectrum, and there are moments when it can feel inconvenient or embarrassing, especially in professional or social settings that are not designed to hold emotional expression with kindness. In those moments, what often helps is not trying to become someone else, but learning how to understand one's own triggers, patterns, and needs, recognizing when tears are signaling fatigue, overstimulation, unresolved grief, or simply the need for rest and reassurance. Self-compassion becomes essential here because the more a person judges themselves for crying, the more emotionally charged the experience becomes, creating a loop of shame and vulnerability that intensifies the response. When that judgment softens, when tears are allowed to be what they are, a natural human response, they often lose some of their overwhelming power. Over time, many people who cry easily come to see their tears not as an enemy to conquer, but a quiet guide, pointing toward what matters most to them, what hurts, what heals, and what they value deeply. In a world that often rushes past feeling in favor of efficiency, these individuals carry a slower rhythm, one that notices, feels, and responds. And while that rhythm may not always be celebrated, it is profoundly necessary. Crying easily does not mean being broken. It means being responsive. It means having a heart that reacts honestly to the world it inhabits. And when you strip away the stereotypes and the shame, what remains is not weakness at all, but a form of emotional courage that allows life to be felt fully, tears and all, without apology.